Hi, my name's Barrie Crampton. Welcome to another episode of Straight Out of Crampton. If you have a coffee percolator in your office, this one is called You're Not Dying Baz, So Wake Up and Smell the Coffee. My mum's mum, Grandma Manning, could be a bit of an old battle axe at times. My grandfather, Pop Manning, he lied about his age so he could fight in the First World War and in the Second World War. He lied about his age too. He served as a Chief Petty Officer in the Navy on a minesweeper. He wanted a guy to be messed with, but my Grand Manning used to shout at him as though she was his commanding officer. She was furious and she'd been berating him for falling asleep in the rocking chair, holding a cup of coffee. The chair had still been rocking when he dropped the cup. He made no attempt to clean it up, and she was mopping the spilled liquid off the floor while at the same time telling him off for being clumsy and lazy. It was about 10 minutes before she noticed that the chair wasn't rocking anymore and he wasn't breathing anymore. He died at the age of 62, having a brew in his favourite chair. He never felt at home on dry land, and I think sitting in his rocking chair reminded him of the swell of the sea. That's the way he would have wanted to go. My dad's dad, Solver Pop, so named because they once had the post office in Solver, Pembrokeshire, had just been told off by my other grandma, Solver Gran. She'd been moaning all day because for some reason the privet hedge at the front of the garden was looking a mess. He used to spend hours in the garden and it was normally immaculate. His lawn was mowed in equal sized up and down stripes and it looked like Wembley. He had a fantastic display of roses. Side note, roses aren't a good idea at Wembley and they'd punctured many of my footballs. Gardening was Solver Pop's favourite pastime. Even though he wasn't feeling well, he couldn't stand it looking untidy. Neither could he stand to listen to my grandma's constant nagging. So he'd gone out to prune the privet hedge. Incidentally, privets make great goals. They don't pop your football, and you don't have to go and fetch it when you score. He was attacking the privets with the shears like a man possessed, and probably muttering to himself about nagging women and kids playing football on his front garden. He suffered a massive heart attack and died. He was 62, but he too was doing what he liked. The last words my mum ever said to my dad was, "Is that your second chocolate cream eclair, you greedy so-and-so? What did the doctor tell you? You won't be happy till you kill yourself, will you?" My dad went off in a huff, but the doctor who'd fitted his pacemaker had told him to take it easy, make sure he took his heart tablets, and to go easy on the dairy products, etc. His cholesterol was through the roof, and under no circumstances had he to walk both of his extremely boisterous dogs at the same time. That had pulled his chest muscles and put even more strain on his heart. My dad wouldn't be told, and he took absolutely no notice of the doctor. He continued to do exactly what he wanted to do and eat what he wanted to eat. While he was out that same night walking both his dogs, he had a massive heart attack. He was dead before he hit the ground. To make matters worse, his dogs had dragged him over the grass verge next to the dual carriageway. He wasn't discovered till the next morning. Was I sad that he died like that? Not really, because I know he wouldn't have felt a thing. He was walking his beloved dogs, and that's the way he'd have wanted to go. He was also 62, and there was a worrying pattern starting to develop if you were a male in the Crampton family. Historically, the women in the family lived to a ripe old age, but that almost changed when my older sister, who was born 5 years before me, was only 52, and she suffered a stroke. She was very lucky to be alive, but it affected her particularly badly. She thought that the stroke had disfigured her face. Nobody else did, and for several years she wouldn't even go out of the house. It seemed to me that rather like the baddie in the film Blade Runner, the guys in our family have a built-in obsolescence date, and we go out like a light before our 63rd birthday. I didn't mind that so much. I've always been a pretty fit and active type. I love sport. and the outdoors. The last thing I would want would be to end up a burden or housebound, like my sister did for a short while. The years ticked slowly away. I'd reached the same decade of my life that my sister was in when she was struck down. I'd already had a couple of health issues, pains in the chest amongst other things. These were mostly self-inflicted and caused by pushing cars, lifting heavy objects, and the stress of watching my cars be paint stripped on CCTV, finding out who'd actually done it, but being helpless to prosecute them, wanted to kill them instead, but not wanting to go to the prison for the rest of my life for murder. The usual sort of problems anyone in the motor trade has to deal with. One of the above issues was causing me problems, and I was having sleepless nights. I could still remember being lectured by my old boss, if you keep burning your candle at both ends, you won't live to see 30. I continued with my somewhat hectic lifestyle and had been on borrowed time for 20 years now. Now it was my girlfriend who was lecturing me. She's not the most sympathetic person that I'd ever met, and she gave me an ultimatum. Either stop moaning or go to the doctors. In all honesty, I was in excruciating pain, and I couldn't have stopped moaning, even if I wanted to, so I went to the doctors. My examination reminded me of an old joke. The guy goes to the doctors. After being examined, the doctor tells him he's got bad news, and he's only got 10 to live. Guy says, 10 what? 10 years? 10 months? 10 weeks? 10 days? 10 what, for God's sake? And the doctor goes, 9, 8, 7, 6. After questioning me about my diet, alcohol intake, career choice and family health, the doctor decided I was like the guy in the joke. I was a heart attack waiting to happen. He told me to open my shirt and hook me up to an ECG machine, which measures the electrical impulses given off while the heart's beating. I was pretty sure it was stress and a pulled chest muscle that were the cause of my discomfort. But when the doctor looked at the printout, he said, "Do you have anyone who could run you to the hospital?" I said, "When?" And he said, "Now, or I'll have to call an ambulance." There's no way I was going in an ambulance. So I pulled my mobile phone out of my shirt pocket and pretended to call my girlfriend. I didn't want to worry her, so I'd be driving myself, but I wanted the doctor to think otherwise. Then I realised that the ECG self-adhesive electrode stuck on my chest had been right next to my shirt pocket where my mobile phone had been. It was on silent and I'd missed 5 calls and several text messages. When you leave your phone near a computer, you can hear the signal, da-da-da-da-da-da. It gives off a pulse and makes a buzzing sound like Morse code. That's even before the phone rings, or this is the way it used to be. And you could hear it through the speakers. The phone signal must have interfered with the ECG and caused the irregular spikes on the graph that the machine had produced. The doctor was having none of my explanation, and he ordered me to go to the hospital. I was given another ECG, and this time I made sure to switch my phone off completely. I hate hospitals, and this one was no different. I was waiting for my results, and it was purgatory being on the ward. There was an old woman who was obviously in pain. She was under heavy sedation, but she was still moaning and shouting for help. The nurses, who were short-staffed and overworked, were just ignoring her. The lady turned her attention to me. She'd mistaken me for her son, and she was begging me for help. She pleaded with me to take her home, but there was nothing I could do for her. Neither could I endure staying in the hospital for another minute longer. I just wanted to go home too. The ward sister refused to discharge me, and she further suggested that I contact my next of kin to tell them that I'd most likely be spending the night under observation at the hospital, as they were waiting for a doctor to look at my ECG results. I'd got no intention of staying, and I told her I was going home, whether she liked it or not. She advised against it and made me sign a disclaimer, which effectively said, "I'm an idiot, I've been warned not to go home, and if I die there, it's my own fault." I couldn't argue with the facts, so I signed it and off I went. I think the hospital decided to teach me a lesson, and they kept me waiting for several days before they rang to tell me that the doctor couldn't see anything abnormal on the ECG, but he still wanted to carry out more tests. One of them would be where I had to run on a treadmill whilst being coupled up to another ECG. It had been an anxious few days. The waiting wasn't helping matters, and I was still feeling dreadful. I was determined that if I was going to die, it would be on my own terms. So I decided that I'd give my heart one of my own tests, and if I survived it, my heart must be okay. If I was going to die, I wanted to go doing something that I really liked, like all my family had done. However, my girlfriend wouldn't agree to this. I could see she was working out the pros and cons in her head when I suggested it. Pro being that she could possibly be rid of me at last. Cons being, if I did die in a compromising position, how would she explain it to her family, my followers on Twitter, the police, the ambulance men, the coroner, the pathologist, possibly an inquest, and perhaps the daily newspapers. Also, if word got round how I'd died, once she'd grieved over my death for a few hours, her chances of finding another boyfriend who wouldn't be afraid to date her would have been severely reduced. I thought she was being a bit selfish, but despite my best efforts, I couldn't persuade her otherwise. So I came up with another plan. I like mountain biking too, but to a lesser degree. Another of my favourite jokes. An old man wanted to marry a 24-year-old girl. His friend told him, "You can't marry a 24-year-old girl." He said, "Why not?" The friend said, "If you marry a 24-year-old girl, you'll have to have sex with her, and that could be fatal." The old guy thought about it for a moment, shrugged his shoulders and said, "Well, if she dies, she dies." I loaded my mountain bike and set off for Helvellyn, which is a mountain in the Lake District. The summit of Helvellyn is 3,117 feet above sea level, and it's the highest place in Britain that you can legally be on a mountain bike. The climb is a killer, but the descent on a mountain bike is possibly the most fun you can have with your clothes on. Just to be on the safe side, I was wearing a skid lid, my heart rate monitor, which I programmed to the recommended upper limit. It would sound a warning beep if my heart exceeded 220 beats per minute minus my age. The ascent is so steep that most of the way it's impossible to stay on the bike and pedal. I was having to carry my bike over my shoulder, my heart was pounding and the monitor was beeping constantly. It sounded like a lorry was reversing up the mountain. I wasn't going to quit and the monitor was getting on my nerves, so I took it off and I put it in my rucksack. I'd also got a HD GoPro camera recording my trip on my helmet. I'd got everything planned carefully. If the worst were to happen, I'd be able to record a last message to the rest of my family and also a message to my best mate, telling him where I'd buried the massive fortune that I'd amassed in the motor trade. That's a joke in itself. I'd be sure to die just before I finished telling him the imaginary directions. It's in the forest next to the tree with a big... By the time I'd gotten to the top, my heart rate monitor would have exploded. All I could hear was the sound of my own blood pumping around my body and my ears, bump, bump, bump. On reaching the summit, the first thing I saw was a dog wearing a rucksack. I thought I must be hallucinating due to the altitude and physical exertion. The ride did almost kill me, but it wasn't the exertion. It was the rocks I hit when I was going down the mountain at full speed. I was wearing special riding shoes with cleats in the sole. The cleats lock into the pedals and allow you to pull and push with your legs rather than just being able to use downward force to propel yourself. I was going too fast, as I always do. Even though my bike is fitted with disc brakes, I still couldn't stop in time. Bikes don't have ABS, so I couldn't swerve either. I saw the rocks which had been set into and all across the cycle path too late as I came round the bend, and I hit them dead centre. Normally you'd fly over the handlebars, but I was attached to the bike pedals, and I did a complete somersault before crashing to the ground a few yards further down the track. I landed sideways and I felt my ankle crack. I thought my leg was broken and I could see it swelling before my eyes. My mishap was only a short way from the summit, and I had visions of having the embarrassment of being carried down by the mountain rescue or flown off by helicopter. But fortunately, I also have GPS on my bike, so I plotted the shortest route down to civilization. By the time I got to the bottom, my leg was so swollen that I couldn't move it or bend my foot. I'd never make it back to my car, which was on the other side of the mountain, about 10 miles away by road, so I used my mobile to look up a local minibus firm on the internet. They came and picked me up and my bike and took me back to my car. Note to self, mobile phones, good in a crisis, not so much in the doctor's surgery next to your ECG. I survived my mountain ordeal, but my heart was to be put to the test several more times before I closed my business. I've covered that in other blogs. Although I was confident that my heart was strong, I was very worried. And to be fair, I still am. All my family's gone out with heart attacks. And I was worried also that I'd fall victim to a stroke like my sister. I researched the symptoms and possible preventions, and the faster you act with a stroke victim, the better their chances of survival and recovery. Signs of a stroke equals fast. F. Face. Has the face fallen on one side? Can they smile? A equals arms. Can they raise both arms and keep them there? S. Speech. Is their speech slurred? T. Time. Time to call 999 if you see any single one of these signs. There are other signs too, apparently depending on which part of your brain the clot is affecting. You can get a strange taste in your mouth, like the taste of pennies. Or you can smell something not dissimilar to burning toast. These symptoms are very annoying, as though I don't often get the urge to suck coins. I have a very short attention span, and I'm always incinerating bread, and most other food types that I cook too. How do you prevent a stroke? 1. Healthy living. Well, that's not going to happen in my case. 2. Apparently, if you take an aspirin a day, it interferes with the formation of thrombi, which causes your blood to clot. I'm allergic to aspirin, so that's not going to happen either. 3. Avoid stressful situations. Hello, I'm in the motor trade. There isn't a snowball's chance in hell that that's going to happen. I had hoped that my new job, selling websites to the motor trade, was going to be a lot less stressful than selling cars to privates. But it hadn't got off to a good start. I was already quite knowledgeable about building websites, but I'd only had a couple of days of training on other aspects of the business, such as search engine optimization and analytics. This wasn't nearly enough. I still had a lot to learn. I'd been studying all the sites that we'd produced and looking through the analytics. I made notes so I could actually contribute to the meeting the next day if I was needed. And I'd been up till the very early hours of the morning preparing. I was feeling tired and under the weather before I set off. My new boss had sent out an email telling our customers about my numerous years of experience in the motor trade and offering my services for questions and answer sessions. I'd arrived early for the meeting. I was really only there to accompany a colleague and observe his presentation and learn. But he was well over half an hour late. I hate being late, so I was already stressed and had gone in to apologise. The clients had read the introduction email and took the opportunity to grill me on several aspects of the motor trade. The two partners had built a successful business and were almost ready to take the next step forward. One of the guys was very laid back and wanted a website. It seemed like the other guy didn't. He was very cautious, rightly so, and his surly attitude made it obvious that he didn't want to spend the money or commit to a 12-month contract. It may have been unintentional, but it seemed like he was doing his level best to spoil my presentation. I was being bombarded with questions about the motor trade and how our website would help and improve their business and make their lives easier. There had been some questions that I didn't know the answer to, and I'd tried to phone my boss, but he wasn't picking up. I hate being made to look stupid, and I should never have been put in that position. It was like being on Mastermind or being interrogated by a couple of detectives using the good cop and bad cop routine. I was in a very awkward position, and I was furious that my colleague was late and he'd dropped me in it. I was extremely hot and uncomfortable in the office, and then it happened. I got a bitter taste in my mouth and an acrid burning smell in my nostrils. It had to be the first signs that I was having a stroke. The thought of having a stroke in the middle of a business meeting with strangers and being miles away from home was my worst nightmare. It was more the embarrassment than anything, but my heart started to race. I could feel adrenaline surging through my body. It was just soaking through. And I looked for an opportunity and an excuse to get the hell out of there. Trying to look as nonchalant as possible. I felt at my face to see if it'd fallen, but I couldn't feel, so I switched on the front camera on my iPhone and looked at my reflection in it. I wasn't looking my best. I was bright red. Just then the door opened and I was saved by the cavalry. It was my tardy colleague. I introduced him very quickly, then I made the excuse that I had to go and call the office. I hurried back to my car. I got in it, reclined the electric seat, closed my eyes and waited to die. Never crossed my mind to drive to the hospital or ring an ambulance. I was happy that I was about to break tradition. Sitting in a Mercedes-Benz wasn't exactly how I wanted to die, but I was going to be the first guy in 3 generations of the Crampton family to pop his clogs without being nagged to death by their spouse. In fact, it'd be exactly the opposite. As I prepared myself for the worst, I recalled possibly the best time of my life, when my girlfriend and I were walking hand in hand through the breaking surf around the point at St. James Beach, Barbados. It was the last day of a fantastic holiday when the sea around us looked like it started to boil. Then it became alive as a shoal of flying fish breached the surface of the water and flitted past us. There were hundreds, if not thousands of them, and they were so close we could have reached out and touched them. It was a perfect moment, and it was surreal. Neither of us would have believed our eyes if the other hadn't been there. I'd started to relax. My heart rate was slowing down. I could no longer taste the burning pennies or smell anything burning or out of place. It was a miracle. I waited another few minutes until I was satisfied that I'd got no other symptoms before returning rather sheepishly to my meeting. It became clear that my hurried exit and call the office story weren't as convincing as I'd hoped. I think my clients were worried that they'd upset me. My new colleague had no idea what was going on, and he was looking at me very suspiciously. I was getting agitated, and I was looking around the room as I could smell the strange burning smell again, and I could taste it in my mouth. Didn't seem to be bothering anyone else. I scanned the room looking for the source. Unless I could find it, I'd have to assume it was just me and go and call the office, sit in the car and dream of my happy place again. Out of the corner of my eye, I spotted the coffee percolator behind me. It was hidden from view by the arm of the sofa where I was sitting. The glass carafe had boiled dry and wisps of smoke were coming from the coffee grounds that were all that was left at the bottom of the glass percolator. The moral of my story is, history doesn't necessarily repeat itself. I'm now 67. 2. Never read a medical book or you will think you've got every disease under the sun. 3. Ignorance is bliss. 4. If you have a coffee percolator in your office, for fuck's sake, make sure it doesn't boil dry or you could give someone a stroke. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Bye bye.